In 1220, travelers on the ancient trade routes of Central Asia stumbled upon something hard to believe. The grand city of Merv, once filled with soaring libraries and bustling markets, now lay silent and covered in ash. It was a haunting reminder of a civilization crushed in an instant. The Khwarezmian Empire had been a giant, stretching from the Caspian Sea to India, controlling the most profitable trade paths. Its rulers saw themselves as heirs to Alexander the Great, governing nearly 10 million people. Yet, in just 3 years, this empire would disappear so completely that future generations would doubt it ever existed. This is the tale of how one insult, a moment of diplomatic arrogance, led to one of the most thorough acts of destruction in history. It started with a trade caravan and ended with the total wipeout of a civilization. The one behind it was Genghis Khan, and his actions would redefine what total war meant. It was 1218, and the world felt big enough for all empires to thrive. Trade flowed like rivers, transporting silk and spices, ideas, and inventions. The Mongol Empire, though rising, seemed to many just another nomadic group beyond the mountains, distant and easy to ignore. But civilizations, as the Khwarezmian leaders would soon find out, can be fragile. Sometimes, they fall not after years of decline, but due to one wrong move. The real danger isn't always from chaos at the borders, but from a force that knows both mercy and destruction, and opts for destruction with clear intent. The Khwarezmian Empire stood at a pivotal moment in medieval history, yet they were oblivious to the significance of their situation. Their leaders were comfortable in their power, sure of their superiority, believing their walls and armies would shield them from any danger. What they were about to learn was how swiftly confidence can turn to ruin, and how quickly the mighty can become mere cautionary tales. What followed would resonate through history, serving as a powerful reminder of how quickly empires can collapse when they confuse cruelty for strength and pride for wisdom. The Mongols weren't just coming as raiders or conquerors. They were something much more frightening: executioners for an entire world. The Khwarezmian Empire, back in the early 13th century, represented the height of Islamic civilization in Central Asia. It was a vast empire that controlled crucial trade routes from the Caspian Sea to the Afghan mountains, and from the Sirdarya River to the Persian Gulf. This included what we now know as Iran, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and parts of Afghanistan and Kazakhstan. Sultan Ala ad-Din Muhammad II ruled from 1200 to 1220, taking the reins of a realm that was already intoxicated by its own success. The Khwarezmians held the famed Silk Road, a web of trade routes linking Europe and Asia, making them incredibly wealthy. Gold, silver, precious stones, and rare goods poured into their cities like a never-ending stream of riches. Their capital cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, and Urgench, were among the world's most magnificent urban centers. They had a formidable military, with hundreds of thousands in their army, including heavily armored cavalry, skilled archers, and siege engineers. Their cities were encircled by towering walls and complex fortifications that had survived many sieges. The Shah's forces had recently vanquished neighboring kingdoms with ease, expanding their power and wealth at every turn. Culturally, the Khwarezmian Empire was a beacon of knowledge and sophistication. Their libraries contained thousands of manuscripts covering mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Scholars from all over the Islamic world came to learn in their cities. Their poets and artists were celebrated from Baghdad to Delhi. They believed they were the rightful heirs to the great Persian empires, the keepers of centuries of civilization. But this success had led to a dangerous overconfidence among the Khwarezmian elite. They dismissed the Mongols, the nomadic horsemen from the steppes, viewing them as uncultured barbarians. The Mongols didn't have cities or libraries, and seemed to have no culture beyond warfare and herding. How could these people pose a threat to an empire that commanded such respect from the civilized world? The geopolitical landscape seemed to favor the Khwarezmians entirely. They had just defeated the Karakitai and absorbed their territories, now bordering the rising Mongol Empire. But instead of seeing this as a threat, the Shah viewed it as a chance. These Mongols could be useful trade partners, or even vassals, bringing in furs and horses in exchange for manufactured goods. Sultan Muhammad III had become quite proud lately. He even challenged the authority of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, claiming he had a divine right to rule. He started calling himself the Second Alexander, convinced he was destined to control large parts of the world. This arrogance would turn out to be the downfall of his empire. It blinded him to the real threat building up outside his borders. The series of events that doomed the Khwarezmian Empire began innocently enough in the spring of 1218, when a large trade caravan approached the border city of Otrar. This wasn't just any merchant group, it was a carefully organized diplomatic mission, backed by Genghis Khan himself. The caravan had around 450 men, including Muslim merchants, Mongol traders, and maybe even some spies. A common thing in medieval diplomacy, they carried incredibly valuable goods: gold, silver, silk, furs, jade, and ivory, worth a fortune. But more importantly, they brought with them a promise of peaceful relations between two powerful empires. Genghis Khan had even chosen Muslim merchants to lead the expedition, understanding that their shared culture and faith would help smooth the discussions. The message was loud and clear. The Mongol Empire wanted trade, not war. However, the governor of Otrar, a man named Inalchuk and the Shah's own uncle, greeted the caravan with suspicion instead of hospitality. Otrar was a key border city, a wealthy trading hub that controlled access to the heart of Khwarezm. Inalchuk, who held the title of Gaya Khan, had significant power in the region, but he was also driven by greed and paranoia. After checking the caravan's credentials and cargo, Inalchuk made a disastrous choice. He declared the entire expedition a nest of spies and ordered the merchants to be arrested. Whether his accusation had any truth is still debated by historians. Medieval trading missions often had a secondary goal of gathering intelligence, but what happened next went far beyond reasonable security concerns. All with the explicit approval of Shah Muhammad. In a shocking move, Inalchuk had the entire caravan executed. 450 men were killed, their bodies left to decay outside the city walls. All their wealth, gold, and precious goods was seized and shared among the governor's allies. Only one camel driver managed to escape, fleeing eastward to warn the Mongol court about this horrific act. This wasn't just random banditry or political murder. At that time, merchants and envoys were seen as sacred, a part of ancient hospitality laws that crossed all religious and cultural lines. Killing a diplomatic mission meant declaring war, and wiping it out completely meant declaring total war. But the Khwarezmian leaders seemed clueless about the gravity of their actions. The massacre at Otrar was a massive failure in judgment. It went beyond greed. It showed they didn't understand Mongol culture or what they were capable of. They had committed a crime under Mongol law that called for not just revenge, but utter destruction. They had stirred something they couldn't even begin to control. When Genghis Khan heard about the Otrar massacre in his capital, Karakorum, he was said to be furiously calculating. The Persian historian Huvayni, who spoke with survivors, noted that Genghis spent 3 full days and nights alone on a hill, weighing his response. When he finally descended, he had made up his mind. The Khwarezmian Empire would face annihilation. But first, he tried one last diplomatic move. In a show of either remarkable restraint or clever strategy, he sent a group of 3 envoys to Sultan Muhammad II. This team included 1 Muslim ambassador and 2 Mongol diplomats, and they had a clear message: return the stolen goods, hand over Governor Inalchuk for punishment, and take responsibility for the massacre. In return, Genghis Khan would consider the matter settled. Sultan Muhammad II's response would ultimately seal his empire's fate. Rather than acknowledging the serious complaint, or even trying to negotiate, he chose to deepen the insult. He ordered the Muslim envoy to be beheaded and had the beards of the 2 Mongol ambassadors shaved off before sending them back. In Mongol culture, a man's beard was a symbol of honor. Shaving someone's sacred hair was seen as a huge disgrace. When the mutilated envoys returned, the Mongol court had a powerful reaction. The sight of these humiliated ambassadors shocked the nobles and generals. Some warriors were so furious they cried, while others pushed for an immediate response. Genghis Khan himself declared, "The Sultan has chosen war. Let him have war." This moment was a turning point. What could have been settled through talks or even tribute had now turned into a fight for honor, one that could only end in complete destruction. The Mongol way of war was clear: total surrender or total annihilation. Sultan Muhammad II chose destruction for his empire. He might not have fully grasped what that meant. The Persian historian al-Nasawi, who was at the Khwarezmian court, later noted that some advisors urged the Sultan to rethink his decision. They recognized how serious this was. But Muhammad II was drunk on his own power, convinced that his empire was unstoppable. He bragged that his armies would chase the Mongol dogs back to where they came from and show them what happens when they threaten a civilized empire. News spread through the Khwarezmian Empire that war with the Mongols was unavoidable. Instead of fear, there was a sense of excitement. The people believed they were about to witness the destruction of a barbaric horde by their superior civilization. They couldn't have been more wrong. The Mongol war machine that advanced toward Khwarezm in early 1219 was like nothing the medieval world had ever encountered. Genghis Khan gathered an army estimated to be between 100,000 and 150,000 warriors. But it wasn't just about the numbers. These weren't mere raiders or tribal fighters. They were the result of years of military advancement and careful selection. The Mongol army moved swiftly and effectively across the Central Asian steppes. Each warrior had multiple horses, giving them unmatched speed and endurance. They carried their own supplies and could live off the land when needed, making them independent and less vulnerable. Crucially, they also had Chinese siege engineers with them. The latest military tech, like gunpowder weapons, was ready to smash the walls of Khwarezmian cities. First up was Otrar, the site of that initial offense against Genghis Khan. He was hands-on during the siege, making it clear this wasn't just about strategy, it was about Mongol justice. The city was defended by Governor Inalchuk, the same guy who had ordered the earlier massacre. They thought they could hold out against a typical siege. But the Mongols? They flipped the script. Instead of just surrounding Otrar and waiting, they brought in clever psychological tactics. They spread lies about their numbers and plans. Captured prisoners were used as human shields in their attacks. The defenders faced an enemy that seemed to have a whole new understanding of warfare. As time went on, stories of these strange Mongol tactics began reaching other Khwarezmian cities. Prisoners revealed that the Mongols offered surrender terms but promised total destruction for those who resisted. This wasn't about ransoming defeated foes or bringing them into the army. It was a brutal plan for extermination. After 5 months, when Otrar finally fell, it sent shockwaves across the empire. Governor Inalchuk was captured and met a horrific end. Molten silver poured into his ears and eyes, a fitting punishment for his greed. The city's population, about 100,000, was wiped out. No one was spared. The city was reduced to rubble, but this was just the beginning. As word spread about Otrar's fate, Mongol forces, led by Genghis Khan's sons, were already heading towards the grand cities of Bukhara and Samarkand. The once confident empire was about to learn what total war meant and the dire consequences of insulting Genghis Khan. The siege of Bukhara in early 1220 marked the start of relentless destruction that would define the Mongol conquest of Khwarezm. This ancient city, a thriving center of Islamic culture and learning for over 1,000 years, was about to see its downfall. Libraries held endless manuscripts, and madrasas drew scholars from all over the Muslim world. The markets buzzed with traders from every part of Asia. When Genghis Khan set his sights on Bukhara, he didn't take the usual path. Instead, he maneuvered his army through the seemingly impassable Kizilkum Desert. This surprise tactic caught everyone off guard, letting him appear right in front of the city walls. Sidestepping the main Khwarezmian forces meant to protect the traditional invasion routes. The shock of this unexpected approach was huge. For the defenders, it must have felt like the Mongols had just sprung out of nowhere. On the third day of the siege, the city's garrison, made up of Turkish soldiers, tried to break out. It was a deadly mistake. The Mongols, known for their clever, feigned retreats, lured the Khwarezmian forces away from their posts and then struck hard. With the main military force defeated, Bukhara's doom was sealed. The city leaders opened the gates, expecting the usual terms of medieval warfare, paying tribute, acknowledging new rulers, maybe only a few key officials being executed. What they got instead was a lesson in Mongol justice that would be remembered for ages. Genghis Khan himself entered the city, and according to those who were there, addressed the crowd with an unsettling calm. He told the citizens that their sultan had wronged the Mongols, and they would pay for his arrogance. The soldiers were killed without mercy. The civilians were sorted into groups. Artisans and craftsmen were spared to be sent as slaves to Mongolia. Young men were drafted into the Mongol army, and the rest faced either execution or slavery. The systematic destruction of Bukhara went on for days. The Mongols looted treasures, burned libraries, and brought down buildings. Witnesses described horrific scenes. Scholars burned alive with their books, families torn apart forever. Centuries of knowledge turned to ash. The Great Mosque of Bukhara, once a marvel of Islamic architecture, was turned into a stable for Mongol horses. What was the most terrifying was how calculated it all was. The destruction wasn't just random chaos from an undisciplined army. No, it was a carefully planned strategy. The Mongols kept what they found useful and systematically wiped out everything else. When they left Bukhara, it was left as a mere shadow of what it once was, a stark warning to any city that dared to resist. Then came the fall of Samarkand, the jewel of the Khwarezmian Empire. It showed just how powerful the Mongol military really was, and how completely the Khwarezmians had crumbled. This impressive city, one of the empire's capitals and a key hub on the Silk Road, was defended by what sources at the time claimed was a garrison of 50,000 men. Yet, many modern historians believe that number was likely inflated. Genghis Khan's tactics at Samarkand highlighted the advanced intelligence network that backed Mongol operations. He knew exactly which routes to take, which defenses were the strongest, and which local leaders might be open to negotiations. This information didn't just come from spies, it came from the hundreds of prisoners taken from previous cities, who were interrogated and often used as human shields in later assaults. The siege lasted just 5 days, but those days showcased the Mongol military's complete dominance. When the garrison tried to counterattack, they fell into the same trap that had claimed the defenders of Bukhara. The Mongols pretended to retreat, stretching the Khwarezmian lines to their breaking point, then turned and slaughtered the overextended forces. By day 3, half the garrison was gone. Sultan Muhammad II desperately tried to save the city, launching 2 relief armies, but was driven back each time by the Mongols, who seemed to predict his every move. The psychological impact of his failed attempts was huge. It sent a message to defenders across the empire. Even the Sultan couldn't protect them, not even in his own capital. On the 5th day, Samarkand finally surrendered. Yet, Genghis Khan's reaction showed how Mongol tactics had become ruthlessly ruthless. Although he accepted the city's surrender, he ordered the execution of every soldier who had fought against him. This blatant breach of traditional surrender terms made it clear there would be no mercy for anyone who resisted, regardless of how they ultimately submitted. The people of Samarkand went through a brutal process, much like what happened in Bukhara. Artisans were spared for slavery, while young men were drafted, leaving the others to face death or deportation. Accounts from that time paint a chilling picture. Families ripped apart, treasures stolen, and buildings torn down with frightening precision. The Mongols had truly mastered urban destruction. But what was most terrifying about Samarkand's fall was how fast it happened. In under a week, one of the greatest cities in the world became just a shadow of its former glory. The message was clear. If Samarkand could fall that quickly, no city in the empire was safe. The Khwarezmian Empire wasn't just being conquered, it was being wiped off the map. The hunt for Sultan Muhammad II marked the total collapse of organized resistance against the Mongol invasion. After watching his cities burn and his armies fall apart, the once mighty ruler, who fancied himself the second Alexander, fled west with just a handful of loyal followers, leaving his empire behind to save himself. Genghis Khan sent his top generals, Subutai and Jebe, after the fleeing sultan, leading 20,000 men. This chase turned out to be one of the greatest military feats of the medieval era, covering thousands of miles over various landscapes. The Mongol commanders showed they could keep up a relentless pace far from their supply lines. They moved like the wind, unstoppable and relentless. The fear they spread during this pursuit was just as deadly as any battlefield. Subutai and Jebe demanded every city and town assist in finding the sultan or suffer the same fate as Bukhara and Samarkand. This created a network of reluctant helpers, making sure Muhammad II found no safe haven in his old territory. As news of his flight spread across the empire, it started a wave of political chaos. Provincial governors and local leaders, realizing their ruler couldn't protect them anymore, began to strike deals with the Mongols, or simply abandon their posts. The empire that had seemed so strong just 2 years earlier was crumbling, not just in battle, but also politically and mentally. The end came in December. In 1220, Muhammad II passed away on a small island in the Caspian Sea, likely from pneumonia. Some say the shock of losing his empire played a part in his death. Accounts from that time paint a picture of his last days filled with delirium and despair. He had made a catastrophic mistake, and now he was in exile. His empire nothing but a fading memory. His death was hugely significant. With their leader gone and their armies shattered, the remaining forces of the Khwarezmian resistance lost all direction. What used to be an empire turned into a collection of isolated cities, just waiting for their turn to be destroyed. The Mongol generals didn't even stop to celebrate their win. They kept on with their mission to wipe out every last bit of resistance. But the death of Sultan Muhammad II was just the end of the beginning. His son, Jalal Alin, would try to piece together what was left of the empire, leading to more battles and even more destruction. The Mongols had reached their immediate goals, but their quest for total destruction was far from over. The systematic eradication of Khwarezmian civilization would carry on for months. The final phase of the Khwarezmian Empire's downfall showcased the full extent of Mongol brutality. Cities like Nishapur, Herat, and Urgent faced a grim choice: surrender immediately or face complete annihilation. Most cities chose to surrender, only to find out that Mongol mercy was a thing of the past. The massacre at Nishapur in February became infamous for its scale and brutal execution. This ancient city, once known as the Pearl of the World, surrendered without a fight, hoping to escape the fate suffered by others. Instead, its people encountered what some contemporary sources describe as one of the largest mass killings in history. Persian historians claimed that over 1 million people were killed, though many modern historians think that number is likely inflated. What made these last massacres particularly dreadful was their methodical approach. The Mongols had established efficient systems for mass executions, dividing populations into smaller groups and setting quotas for soldiers. In Nishapur, each Mongol warrior was ordered to kill between 300 and 400 civilians. The slaughter continued for days, as the Mongols worked through their grim task with chilling efficiency. As the Mongols worked through the entire city of Nishapur and its surroundings, they focused on this place because it was the birthplace of the famous poet Omar Khayyam. A Mongol prince had been killed during its siege, and Genghis Khan's daughter-in-law took charge of the city's destruction. She ordered that nothing alive be left. Reports from that time talk about piles of skulls. Men, women, children, even pets like cats and dogs were all killed to make sure nothing survived. The siege of Urgench, the last major stronghold of the Khwarezmian Empire, dragged on for 6 long months, demanding Genghis Khan's personal involvement. Positioned along the Amu Darya River, the city was tough to attack. Its defenders, led by a general still loyal to the Sultan, fought fiercely, knowing that surrender meant death. When the city finally fell, the The Mongols altered the river's course to ensure it could never be rebuilt. By the end of 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire had essentially vanished. The once great cities that controlled the Silk Road lay in ruins. Libraries filled with centuries of knowledge turned to ash. A population that had once numbered in the millions was either dead, enslaved, or scattered. An entire civilization had been wiped off the earth in less than 3 years. What made this destruction so striking was its methodical nature. It wasn't just a military defeat followed by some political takeover. It was more like an act of genocide as we understand it today. The Mongols didn't just conquer the Khwarezmian Empire, they erased it from history, leaving only a few survivors behind to recount what had been. The fall of the Khwarezmian Empire sent shockwaves throughout the medieval world, leaving a lasting impact that would be felt for centuries. The speed and totality of the conquest shattered previous ideas of military might and the safety of diplomacy. In just 3 years, one of the world's most powerful empires had crumbled into ruins and traumatized survivors. This showed that no civilization, no matter how strong it appeared, was safe from complete destruction. The immediate effects on the Islamic world were devastating and long-lasting. The Khwarezmian Empire had been a significant center of Islamic civilization, home to celebrated scholars, poets, and thinkers. Its demise was more than just a political loss. It represented the loss of a rich cultural heritage. It was a disaster that stalled Islamic learning and culture for ages. Libraries with priceless manuscripts went up in flames. Scholars? They were either killed or enslaved. Whole intellectual traditions vanished for good. The population took a huge hit too. While exact numbers from that time are hard to come by, it seems the region's population might have plummeted by as much as 90% during the Mongol invasion. Entire cities were left deserted, irrigation systems fell apart, and nomadic lifestyles replaced settled farming across huge stretches of land. It took centuries for the region to bounce back to its old population levels, but the psychological impact spread far beyond what was left of the empire. News of the Khwarezmian destruction traveled along trade routes and diplomatic lines, reaching Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The message was loud and clear. Genghis Khan wasn't just another conqueror looking for tribute or land. He was like a force of nature, capable of wiping out entire civilizations. This reputation became a weapon in itself, causing many foes to surrender without a fight. Economically, the impact was massive. The Khwarezmian Empire controlled important sections of the Silk Road, and its collapse disrupted trade between East and West. Yet, the Mongols quickly saw the value in those routes and moved to restore them under their control. Ironically, the forces that dismantled the Khwarezmian trading network ended up creating an even bigger commercial system under Mongol rule. The political landscape changed significantly too. With the fall of a major power, neighboring states rushed to fill the gap. The Ayyubid dynasty in Egypt and Syria, the Rum Sultanate in Anatolia, and various successor states in Iran all found new opportunities and new threats. The balance of power across the Middle East and Central Asia shifted permanently. Most importantly, this conquest set a new standard for total war, shaping military strategies for years to come. The Mongols showcased that entire empires could be methodically destroyed. This served as both a warning and inspiration for future conquerors. The idea of total war, the total elimination of an enemy's ability to fight back, had become a practiced skill, leading to consequences that would echo through history. As we look back on history, we see the dramatic downfall of the Karakitai Empire, and we're reminded of some tough realities about civilization and how fragile our achievements can be. Back in 1218, the Karakitai ruled over vast lands, had strong armies, and their centers of education were among the best anyone had seen. But by 1221, they had faded into obscurity, mostly remembered for their sudden destruction. This swift collapse shows just how fast all those years of progress can vanish. Libraries that took generations to create were wiped out in days. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled in just weeks, A culture, rich in Persian, Turkic, and Islamic influences, disappeared so completely that we mostly learn about it from the very conquerors who destroyed it. This wasn't just a slow decline or some unavoidable twist of history. It came down to choices made by real people. Sultan Muhammad II made the fateful decision to kill Genghis Khan's envoys, sealing the fate of millions. And when Governor Inelchuk chose to seize the Mongol caravan out of greed, he triggered a disaster for his entire civilization. The takeaway here? When you hold power, your choices can impact countless lives beyond your own. The Kara Khitai's downfall also highlights the dangerous illusions that often cloud the judgment of those in charge. The Shah and his close advisors actually believed their empire was unbeatable. They thought their enemies were mere barbarians, and their cultural sophistication would protect them from harm. This arrogance blinded them to the reality of their situation until it was too late to save themselves or their people. But what's truly chilling is how easily this story could play out again. The same factors that led to the Kara Khitai's ruin, pride, miscalculations, underestimating foes, and failing at diplomacy, could threaten any civilization. The tools may change, but humanity's ability to make catastrophic mistakes remains constant. The ruins of cities like Merv, Samarkand, Bukhara, and Nishapur remind us of a stark truth. Civilization isn't a lasting achievement. It's a delicate balance that requires careful tending. The Kara Khitai learned too late that empires can take centuries to build, but can be destroyed in mere years. Cultural sophistication doesn't shield you from determined foes. Sometimes, those who seem like the barbarians at the gates are far from it. The Khwarezmian Empire stands as a stark reminder of how swiftly and completely human accomplishments can crumble when pride takes over and insults fill in for diplomatic efforts. Their empire didn't fall because it was weak. Rather, its leaders stirred up forces they couldn't understand or control. The silence that blanketed their cities after 1221 is a lasting warning. Civilizations that forget they're mortal often don't live to learn that lesson.